there everybody, Lisa Gale back, and today we're going to be making a lemon blueberry peach pie, basically peach and blueberry. And this recipe is adapted from the Land O'Lakes site for a fresh peach blueberry pie. Now that I said that, I'm going to tell you I didn't have any fresh peaches. They're just not in season right now, so I'm using frozen. And if you're using frozen peaches like me, you have to let them thaw and drain, which I've been doing. I am using fresh blueberries. Mr. Go got some wonderful fresh looking blueberries, nice and big and tasty. So we're going to be using those, about a cup. I already had an extra pie crust in my freezer that I took out and I'm letting thaw. So that's in the original recipe, they have you make your own homemade crust, and you can use whatever pie crust you homemade or frozen. So we have that ready, and we're just going to start in with our fruit. Going to add our peaches. Hopefully you can see. There we go. Just added the peaches to a bowl. The 1 cup of fresh blueberries. What we have here is 3/4 cup white sugar. I'm just going to pour that in there. 2 tablespoons cornstarch. It's a little bit right here. I'm going to get my little spatula. Perfect. That little, you never know how much of it you need, so make sure you get all in there. And a 1/2 teaspoon of ground ginger. Gonna add that in there. If your family doesn't like ginger, or you think ginger is too strong of a flavor, you don't have to add it, but I personally like ginger, and so does the family, so we're putting that in there. And then I have the zest. It calls originally for 2 teaspoons of zest. If you want to measure it, you can. However, I just use the zest of 1 lemon. I figure that is about 2 teaspoons. If you want to be exact to measure it, you can. And I have this little gadget here. It's a zester. Zesters come in all shapes and sizes. This is the one we use. The secret in zesting is you don't want to get the pith. You don't want to, once you get the skin off, the skin is where all the flavor and oils is. The pith is where the bitterness is. So you don't want to zest down to the pith. So you just zest like this and move where the fresh shiny skin is with that lemon, and about 1 when you're done. That's all you'll need. Put that in there, kind of as a little zing to your pie. Also helps with keeping the fruit a little from turning brown, and you put it in there, especially if you're using the fresh peaches. Now we're going to give this a little stir. Just kind of toss it all together in the bowl. There we go. It's looking good. You just want everything to get nicely coated. I hope it's a good day wherever you're at. Here is rainy again, 2nd day in a row. The temperature isn't too bad. It's fairly warm outside, but it's just damp. Okay, and that's about, it's getting pretty tossed now. Everything's starting to look pretty uniform. That cornstarch is starting to get mixed in well. And we're just going to throw that right down into the pie pan. I did not pre-bake this shell, and you don't have to pre-bake it. You can, I suppose you could if you want to. You could do whatever you want to. As we always say, any recipe you see or read or try, you can always tweak it to your own personal preference and that of your family's. And I'm just going to use my fingers. They are clean, and I did wash them before we started. Just spread the blueberries and the peaches out a little bit. Get them all flattened in there nice. And this looks like to be about the perfect amount of fruit. Any more, I think it would be too packed. Any less, it may not be enough. So I'm just spreading the blueberries out a little bit so all the fruit kind of evenly, color-wise, peeks through the topping. Oh, yeah, and did I mention there's a topping? Well, here we go. Wash my hands a little bit. That just looks beautiful like it is, doesn't it? That would definitely brighten up any dinner table or dessert table you put down on. Now for the topping, we're going to just slide this over to the side for a minute. And for the topping, I have a topping bowl and ingredients that are mostly ready to go here. This is going to be a little tiny bit of work, but not much. We're going to go ahead and mix our dry ingredients in, which for the topping is 3/4 cup flour, or 3/4 cup of flour, 1/2 cup brown sugar. And for anybody who has cooked for any time at all, you know about packing brown sugar before you measure it. And I'm going to show maybe some of you who are new to it. You want to scoop that brown sugar down into your measuring cup. And I kind of like to pack it as it goes. Of course, the side, we'll clean that up later. And I like to take the palm of my hand and just smush it down, pack it down with the palm of my hand. Hands are nice and strong, so I feel like that's a good way to get it packed. And then you just dump it. And notice when you dump it packed, it keeps its shape. And that's what you want when you're adding packed brown sugar. We're going to add about 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. I eyeball it. It's not a terribly large amount of cinnamon, which, you know, sometimes I think we overdo the cinnamon, so you don't have to get too crazy with it. And the next thing you're going to add is 1/3 cup cold butter, chunked up. Now, most of you don't know, and I don't know if all butter comes marked. I believe it has. I can't tell you honestly that I've ever purchased any type of butter from the store that didn't come pre-marked, unless you buy it like in the big block. But if you buy your butter in the sticks, then these measurements are right on the side. You just have to look. It says right here, and I don't know if you can see it, but it will tell you that 1/3 cup, which is what we're using, is 5.5 tablespoons equals 1/3 cup. It's right on the label. Then, so we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they even have it marked into thirds so that you can easily just put your knife right on there. And try and get where you can see here a little bit and cut. I'm going to put the other half or other part, it's in a half, over to the side. Obviously, if you're working in a kitchen and cooking and baking, you know you're going to use that sometimes, so you never throw anything like that out. I'm going to wrap it. And I chunk it like this. I don't know how anybody else does it, but I cut the stick into thirds long ways, turn it on its side, cut it into thirds again, and then I just chop it like this. All done. Bada boom, bada bing. Your butter is chopped. Now before I add this to the topping bowl, I'm gonna get a spoon and I'm gonna just kind of mix these all together before I add the butter to it. So when I do add the butter, the rest of the topping ingredients are a little bit more evenly dispersed. This takes a second. There we go. Get rid of all those little clumps, brown sugar clumps in there. Doesn't mean your brown sugar is bad. It's just sugar, so it will clump together. If your brown sugar ever gets hard, you can always put it on a cookie sheet in the oven for just a few minutes. Keep an eye on it, and eventually it will soften up. It's sugar and a little molasses. It's just gonna soften up, and you'll be able to use it again. Dump in our 5 1/3 cup butter. And then this is where, if you have a pastry cutter, you're going to take your pastry cutter and you're going to cut that cold butter in there. I personally prefer my hands. And yes, they're going to get a little sticky. That's why I have my towel right here so I can immediately wipe when I'm done. And I'm just going to go in with my hands. And I like to take both my hands and just get right in there. Mix that butter, get those dry ingredients and all those little butter chunks and go. Now some people will tell you this isn't the best method because your hands are warm. So it's going to start to kind of melt that cold butter a little bit. But if you keep the dry ingredients basically between you and the butter and you move quickly, it really, lost a bit. It really isn't going to affect it too much. There are certain things and pastries that you make, you do need that butter to still remain cold. As a matter of fact, I make a scone recipe where you freeze the butter and you grate the frozen butter into the pastry before you do this step. And in certain pastries, it's more important. This is just a topping on a pie. And basically, you just want to kind of incorporate it into kind of coarse chunks. And I think that's pretty good. And now, let's just add it to the top of the pie. I already have the oven preheated to 400 degrees, and this is going to bake for about 35 to 40 minutes or until the top is kind of brown and the fruit is bubbly. So as with everything, baking times are suggested and you have to take into account your own oven and how hot or how cool it bakes. My oven tends to bake really hot, so I always end up taking it out a little early. And, you know, us cooks and bakers, we know that it's trial and error sometimes, and learning your own equipment is part of the fun and joys of cooking and baking in your home, whether it's a new home or old home, new appliances. And you don't necessarily have to pat it down. I'm kind of trying to keep it, make sure it stays on the pie and doesn't, so I'm not really patting it down as much as just making sure the edges of my pie, the topping is in there. Don't want to clean my oven just because I baked the pie. Because the crust will continue to brown, even if the inside is still baking, you can add aluminum foil to the edges. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put this pie in the oven and let it start to bake. And I'm going to check on it in about 30 minutes. And if I see that those edges are starting to get a little too brown, I will take it out and wrap some foil around the edges so it doesn't continue to get too brown. And here it goes. And we're going to check back in later when the pie comes out and see how it turned out. And I'll check back in with you later. Hi, I'm back. I just wanted to share with you what the pie looks like now that I took it out of the oven. And if you had smell-o-vision, you would definitely want to try this. It smells wonderful. And here's our finished pie product right there. For me, I kept it in about 30 minutes. And your oven, like we said before, may be different. But that's all for today. Y'all have a good rest of the afternoon, and I'll see you again.